Okay, good morning, everybody on the ABC 15 Facebook page. Thank you so much for joining me and Karla once again this morning. Plenty to talk about in education. And so I say we just jump right into it, Karla.
Good morning, everybody.
Yeah, it's been a crazy week. There has been so much happening, so much to talk about. And actually, you emailed me this morning kind of some updates that you've gotten as far as some of the private schools, what they're doing as far as reopening. And you also followed up on this whole question of some charters making masks optional. So why don't you go ahead and give us an update on what you've been able to find out?
Okay, sure thing. Thank you for joining us, everyone. So a couple of things. I know that the Catholic school system here in the Valley in the state has opted to push back the beginning of the school year at least until 9/8. And I'm hearing that some of the high schools are actually opting to put out an indefinite person back to school situation, making everybody online. So I took a quick look at all the schools, and I think we have about 20 in the elementary, well, K through 8 schools in the Valley. There's about 5 high schools. So just goes to show, again, like I told you this morning, Danielle, that, you know, even though they're in the private school sector, they're opting for being careful and for making, you know, the in-person learning a little further back than what we initially expected, which was August 17th. I just wrapped up an interview, and I thought I'd share this with you before it goes away from mine, but I wrapped up an interview with the Organization for Homeschooling Nationwide. Her name's Rachel Coleman, and they're up in the Chicago area. And she was telling me that in her neighborhood, they have 1 out of every 4 tests is positive. So that's very different than us here in Arizona, 1 out of every 4. And they are virtually doing online, like every district in that Chicago area. And so I was sharing with her what we're doing here, and she was just mind blown. She was like, I cannot believe that schools are having in-person learning with your numbers. And so I just said, you know, that's where we're at. But every day we get updates from schools, like, you know, the Catholic school system, and they're really, you know, making these decisions, right? And they're just so hard, such hard decisions during what we discussed at our state, and a lot of parents wanting to push for that in-person learning. I heard back from the charter school that was in question. This one parent, also, it's American Leadership Academy. We know that they're very popular here in the East Valley. They responded this morning saying that they are giving parents the option to decide whether or not their child wears a mask, but that is all contingent upon any laws or mandates that come before the beginning of the in-person learning. So they are telling us that if the governor or if the state superintendent or if any other mandate comes across that that mandate that masks be worn, they will abide by that law. So TBD, so to speak, as far as whether or not you're going to be able to have that option at ALA, depending on what our governor rolls out or a state superintendent.
Yeah, and that's something, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I'm actually going to be speaking with Superintendent Hoffman today at 2:00. And that's one of the questions I'm going to ask her about is, you know, I know the governor's executive order says a face covering requirement. So does that mean that all schools in the state are required to have, you know, students and staff wearing masks if kids are back for in person? So hopefully we'll get some more clarity on that by this afternoon and by earlier this evening. I think that would be great, because there's so many questions regarding that executive order and where we stand now. And actually, Karla, you mentioned the Catholic schools and some of the private sector issuing their plans. Gilbert Public Schools, I literally just got a message from someone about 10 minutes before we hopped on this Facebook Live. And the initial Facebook post message said, hey, you know, Gilbert delayed their in-person until October. Well, I went back and I looked at the board meeting from last night, which was over 5 hours long, by the way. Lots of public comment from people concerned about reopening for in-person instruction. So I reached out to the district and they were great. They got right back to me. Just want to give some clarity for anybody who may be a little confused as to what happened for Gilbert Public Schools last night. They essentially passed a motion that says, starting August 5th, school will start online. They will continue online until these benchmarks, which we're expected to receive from the Department of Health Services in the next week or so, until those are met, they will stay online. Now, if they get to September 22nd and those benchmarks still have not been met, they will meet again and they will revisit this whole issue of in-person instruction. So there's kind of a plan, but parents are still, basically parents and teachers will get a 1 week notice when Gilbert says, okay, the benchmarks have been met, we start in person next week. So they'll get a week to plan, but it's still unknown when that will be. So I felt like that meeting and that situation really kind of summed up what a lot of districts are facing right now. You know, they were talking about how do we decide who gets to take advantage of our in-person learning supports that we have to have up by August 17th. You know, do we push back to fall break? Do we push back to Labor Day? I mean, 5+ hours of these conversations, and you can tell it's draining and it's really wearing on them. So I just wanted to clarify that because if you weren't able to stay up till past 11 o'clock at night to watch the end of that board meeting, that is what happens. So just, you know, a lot of questions, a lot of districts trying to make decisions, but there really aren't concrete deadlines or things. And so, as we always say, plenty to talk about in the world of education. For sure. One thing that we definitely wanted to hit today, Karla, you mentioned this Queen Creek district, this waiver, the idea of signing a COVID-19 waiver. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so it came into our newsroom yesterday. A parent sent it over to us, and it's basically you signing off that you will not hold the district accountable if your child were to be testing positive for COVID, and you wouldn't basically put it on the school that is where your child was, got the virus. That they also mentioned, that there's many places where we all go, where we all travel to, and that it would be difficult to really pinpoint it as to being at the school. And so they're asking parents to sign up on these waivers before the beginning of the school year. That's what I'm gathering, all the data that I've been trying to get. But Danielle, you clarified this to me. That was the first I had ever heard this document, but it's been happening at other districts and with those parents who have had their kids in summer programs. Can you talk about other districts, not just Queen Creek?
Yeah, definitely. I want to also give a shout out real quick to Zach Crenshaw, because he kind of took this story and found out some great information last night that I wasn't aware of either. And so basically this idea of a COVID-19 waiver, we did see some school districts making this mandatory for kids to return to summer programs. For instance, I know Peoria Unified did the waiver for summer program, says they're not planning on doing it for the school year. I believe Mesa and I believe Deer Valley also did COVID-19 waivers for their summer programs. Mesa hasn't decided yet on a waiver for the school year, but Madison School District in Phoenix says it is going to require a waiver. And so a lot of this boils down to one of the biggest insurers of school districts in Arizona essentially sent out a letter last week saying that they were going to remove some of those COVID-19 protections, that they weren't going to cover districts in the event of a COVID-19 issue. And so that's where this whole problem with liability comes in. So I want to share my screen really quick. I want to pull up Zach's story that he did last night, because again, he called me when he was starting this story just to ask some questions of what I knew. And by the end of the night, he had uncovered some great information that again, I wasn't even aware of. So this, we're all working as a team here to try to get everybody answers. So I'm just going to pull up his story from last night, because it kind of spelled it out really nicely as to what is happening here. So basically, he learned last night that 249 of the 256 traditional school districts in Arizona, that they got a standard waiver from the Arizona School Risk Retention Trust. And that's referred to as the trust. So if you hear us talking about the trust, that's what that is. And it's essentially the statewide insurance carriers for schools so that they would be shielded from potential lawsuits connected to coronavirus outbreaks in schools. So that's why the trust gave out these standard waivers to those school districts. They don't need to be signed by parents for their kids to return to in-person classes. The trust saying that this was just a recommendation, that it wasn't required for districts to give to parents, but that it was an option. Also, this is the new info here. Apparently, the trust, they told Zach Crenshaw last night that they have developed a coverage option that would make this optional waiver essentially obsolete. So the board is going to vote on that August 4th. So hopefully by next Tuesday, we'll have more answers as far as these waivers and if they're needed or not. What type of coverage protections districts would get. But I encourage you to go to abc15.com and look up his article here about Arizona parents asked to sign these waivers, because it does have some great information. And that is something that we will be following up on August 4th to see, okay, are these waivers even really needed? I think parents were just really caught off guard. There hadn't really been that explanation of, okay, this is what's happening. This is why we're giving it to you. It kind of just showed up in their parent portals. And I think that's what made them very uneasy about it. But, we're seeing those waivers in a lot of other places too. I mean, I know for us, to use some community amenities, our HOA wanted people to sign a COVID waiver. And, there's other places doing the same thing to try to mitigate against any potential lawsuits. So that's where we are on the waiver. But again, shout out to Zach for uncovering that last night, because it definitely puts it into perspective and gives us a little clarity, which we all need more of that clarity right now.
And Danielle, just to piggyback off of that, Nicole Dirks at 11, just a minute ago, she wrote, Mesa schools are doing this now. So okay. We will reach out to them. I know that's one of the districts. I know another one of the districts that hasn't come out and fully explained that. So we'll reach out to Mesa Public Schools. Thank you, Nicole, for that information. Again, every day it's like a basket full of information that comes down, right? And we're doing our best, but thank you for sharing with us. Earlier asked if school districts were going to be giving hotspots and laptops, and I think it really depends on your district. I would highly recommend that you call them. Maricopa gave us all laptops and hotspots. We start online tomorrow. That's it. Thank you so much for that. Now, Maricopa, you mean Maricopa, the city, out in Maricopa City, or
might be Maricopa Unified? Maybe
Maricopa Unified. I know yesterday my story was on AJ, Apache Junction Unified. They have 3,200 students. They gave everybody laptops and hotspots. So for those parents who said, I don't have internet connection, well, there you go. So talk about really undertaking a massive effort to get everybody able to connect at home. And good thing for AJ, we're saying that they have a designated person at the district taking all those calls from teachers when a student has poor internet connection. I think we had our podcast this morning, and they're really jumping on it as quick as possible to get that kiddo back into the classroom if that child having any issues. Okay, there she is. Maricopa, Arizona, Butterfield School for my kids. Awesome. Congratulations, Angelique. I think your kids are there, right? We're all working towards the same goal, which is to just keep these kiddos learning, keep the education going amid the pandemic that we're in.
Yes. And also real quick, I just want to weigh in on the Mesa Public Schools. I did get a message from their communications officer last night at 9:00 saying a decision has not been made yet about waivers. And then she also updated me that athletic summer workouts start up again this week. So I don't know, maybe that's changed since 9:00 last night in Mesa, but as of last night, they were telling me that they hadn't made a decision yet. And they might be waiting for that August 4th meeting too, to decide if those waivers are really even going to mean anything, depending on what the trust is able to offer. I think, Karla, you bringing up the devices and the internet, Chrissy Sherburne, about 11 minutes ago, I saved it because I think this is really important. She said, devices aren't the only problems. Poor internet connection, overcrowded online classes makes it really hard for even the good students. They're having issues staying attentive. And that's so true. Tonight at 10 o'clock, we're doing a story on the digital divide. And basically, remote learning is now how students are starting the school year. But there are still hundreds of thousands of students in Arizona who either don't have adequate access to the internet or they don't have devices. I'm actually going to mention just a couple of numbers here real quick from a recent report from Common Sense Media. That report was called Closing the K through 12 Digital Divide in the Age of Distance Learning. They estimated that in Arizona, 335,558 students lack adequate access to the internet, and that 220,544 students don't have devices at home for distance learning. So that's roughly 29% of students lacking that internet access, 19% of students who don't have the devices. And then they broke it down even further that 56% of students who lack access to the internet are Black, Latinx, or Native American. And so I think there are even more concerns that this digital divide is exacerbating the inequities that already exist in education, with certain kids maybe not getting the best education because they just don't have the means or they don't have access to the tools that they need. So I was fortunate enough, I was down yesterday at Chicanos por la Causa at their community center, and I spoke with two families. Both of them hit pretty hard by the pandemic, dealing with job loss, cutback hours. Meantime, their kids are trying to do their remote learning. One family, they had 4 kids, ages 5 to 15, and only 2 computers in the house and spotty internet. And so their mom, Nancy, was telling me, and you'll hear from her tonight in our story, that it's really frustrating because you've got, one child's doing their homework online, you've got another one who has to wait, and then another one's maybe missing their Zoom because they just don't have the computer. And, meantime, you've got another kid in the background trying to get in the other one's shot. And she just said it's been really difficult for them keeping up with the online learning, and also the language barrier too. Nancy spoke Spanish, and she said that was tough in trying to help her kids at home with their online learning because some of it, it's hard for her to even understand what they're doing. So Chicanos por la Causa is working to help families with that. They're providing some of those laptops. They're helping families with their internet bills, so that they can try to facilitate this. But it was pretty eye-opening, Karla, being down there and speaking with these families and seeing what a need there is to help bridge this divide that's existed already, but is now really just widening because of this pandemic. It really was eye-opening to be down there.
Absolutely. And we did speak to Stephanie Parra. We did a story about Latinos and the Latino population. And one of the things that she kept mentioning over and over, I also mentioned to you, Danielle, is that the communication barrier. And not only, it's not much the fact that parents didn't have computers. So they got computers, but once they got computers, they weren't, taught how to maneuver through Blackboard or Chalkboard, any of these online platforms. And I got to tell you, as my own kids went to Google Classroom, oh my gosh, it was such a learning experience for me about how to submit assignments online. And, I don't see it. And my daughter's like, it's there. And so anyway, it's hard for all of us, right? And so I think one of the issues that they're going to be addressing, especially in these like highly concentrated areas where there's other languages that are spoken, not just Spanish. We're talking a refugee population. We know we have some Vietnamese populations. And so it's really helping the parents. They've never had to jump on a Google Classroom before. So it's not just here's a laptop, go figure it out. It's here's a laptop, let me teach you what it is that your child is going to be doing online and how you are going to have to be part of that education process in order for your child to submit all of his papers, all of his work, all of his tests. So Stephanie mentioned they are working very diligently with those districts to really not just give computers blankly, but really give them the tools that parents are going to need in order for their child to be successful.
Yeah, and another thing that the community center there offers is, there were kiddos there while we were there. Their parents were working and they needed a safe place to go, and so they were on the computer. They were reading. They were, basically having just some supervised time, because a lot of these families, their parents work or they're essential workers, and they do have to be out of the house. And so that's a whole nother element of how do you give these kids the best remote learning experience when there are so many factors that are kind of working against that. And so, again, that story is coming up tonight at 10 o'clock. So we'll hear more from these families. We'll hear what Chicanos por la Causa is doing. And also something else I'll circle back with the superintendent about. I know that they have developed a technology task force at the state level, and they are working to try to bridge some of this divide, not just here in some of our, downtown communities, but also on the Navajo Nation. I mean, that's a whole other issue as far as logistics and access, especially with how hard hit those families have been by the pandemic. And so one thing I'll give Superintendent Hoffman credit for is she has never sugarcoated that issue. I mean, she's always said, this has been an issue. It's now exponentially worse. We're doing our best to provide services to every child out there, but with more than 1 million students in Arizona and hundreds of thousands without the adequate access or devices, she has said it's impossible to reach all of those students. And so we just want to make sure that we're still keeping those stories in the forefront, just so people can see what remote learning looks like for different families as well. And Karla, I kind of have to laugh a little bit because some folks are commenting here on the microphone and the spotty internet. And I just kind of want to say, this is what families are dealing with when they're trying to remote learn too. I mean, I heard her, Karla kicked one of her kids off their gaming system to try to up her internet. She's got another kiddo right there. So we are doing our best, just like all parents, given the infrastructure we have.
I want everybody to know we have tried. I'm literally standing right next to my modem, to my wireless modem, and nobody is online in my house. I don't know what it is. Maybe my entire neighborhood right now is online. Everyone's working from home. So I apologize. Please be patient. Somebody said we should send India to fix her microphone. Yeah, if that's going to fix it, send me to India because I don't know what else to do. We're doing our best, guys. We've got kids at home ourselves. Danielle, you've got 2 little ones at home. I haven't seen yet. I'm sure at some point we will. So just bear with us. We're doing our very best. Seriously.
Yeah. So something else that I want to make sure that we hit on today, in me having the opportunity to speak with Superintendent Hoffman today, we want to get viewer questions. We want to make sure that we are bringing the questions to her that our viewers, that our communities really want to know. And so, I've brainstormed some important topics, obviously, that I think we need to hit. I think there's still a lot of confusion over the executive order and when school can start, what districts are trying to follow. Karla, in your talks with families and parents, is that kind of what you're getting to?
Absolutely. A lot of confusion is still out there, and not a lot of clear direction. So, this is, as a communicator, I had a meeting last night with our little school, and communication is key. Communication eliminates ambiguity, and ambiguity gives you anxiety. So if we communicate in a clear way, then we eliminate all of these questions. In fact, one of the things that I suggested was creating a frequently asked questions to our Facebook page, because many of the questions that I have, I'm thinking 398 other parents have. Does that make sense? And so I think that's the key in all this, and that's what we're trying to do, right? Is call the people that we know and getting so many of those answers. And again, I'm going to bring back what I just did with with that homeschooling representative from the Chicago area, and just where they are, where we are. One thing I wanted to bring up that I hadn't done before, Danielle, is, they went through that peak of the pandemic back in April and May, and she said in her child's classroom, kids lost grandparents, kids lost parents, because they were back. That was the post time when they were dealing with COVID-19. We are now dealing with those numbers that they dealt back in April and May. And so I just kind of want to bring that perspective. They are going online over there, and they are not ready to go to in person. And so I'm not saying what way or the other here, but it's important for us to keep that into perspective about just where our numbers are at, and keeping that at top of mind when we decide to either send our kids back to school or not, because I think we're still in that high level of cases. Would you agree, Danielle?
Yeah, and I think it's hard because we're relying on public health experts to give districts a guideline of when it would be considered safe to go back to school. I mean, that's something that we don't know, as parents, even as journalists, we don't know what the metrics are that would make school safe. And so, that's why those benchmarks that are due out by August 7th are so important. I'll obviously be asking Superintendent Hoffman about that as far as where we're at with that. The other thing that I think is interesting with those benchmarks, and again, this is something that may be cleared up when I speak with her this afternoon, but it's my understanding that there isn't any sort of approval process to go back to start in-person learning. I think, we're trusting the districts to make, and charters, I should say, all schools really, to make the best decisions for their communities, but there doesn't seem to be an accountability factor there of, okay, do they have to check with someone like, hey, we've met these criterias, can we reopen? I haven't seen anything like that. And so I think that's also a concern for parents who are worried that schools are just going to start reopening August 17th and they'll say, oh, we hit the benchmarks. When did they really? So I think that's another question too. But again, we also have to remember there are parents out there who want the choice to put their kids back in school. I posted some pictures from last night's rally at the Capitol of the parents who want in-person instruction, who want that choice. And so, unfortunately, there really are two sides to this reopening debate, and they are very divided. And I don't know how you bring those two sides together.
And at one point, for those of you who are just joining us today, I brought this up yesterday. Arizona has been a choice state, right? It's a very individual, very independent state as far as education is concerned. Over the last 20 years that I've lived here, that I've been a reporter or a parent, we pride ourselves, right, as a state in saying to parents, you have a choice. You are the best person to decide where your child should go to school. And so that is reflective during this pandemic. That is how we are as a state. So not blaming one specific person, not putting this on a specific person, but just in general, right? The way we operate as a state and as our educational system. So that is reflective right now as far as how our governor is laying it all out, to letting every individual district kind of set those parameters. But I agree, Danielle, it's hard when there isn't that that checklist, right? District to say, yep, our community spread is at this level, and we've done this amount of PPE, and we have set up this type of situation in there's no proctor, there's no one coming in and double checking that. And so I think it's going to rest on us as parents to really see for ourselves, like, okay, are you really doing all the things you are supposed to be doing? Otherwise, I'm going to decide to keep my child at home. I know that that's going to be my approach, at least for now, because of the child situation that I have at home. And really asking for everything and anything that I need to support that child, right? If it's an actual book, because the online system may be what it is with kids all online. I mean, think of it. We're going to have every single child at home downloading and uploading to the internet. So if I need to circumvent the internet and get the child on a MacBook, then so be it. But as a parent, I think that's going to rest on us rather than us counting on the district or the school providing that their own. And I'm not sure, I'm not speaking to any specific district. I'm just saying it really takes us to be involved. And that's one thing that Rachel said from the Homeschooling Institute back in Chicago. She said, it really puts you as a parent in charge and in the driving seat when it comes to this pandemic. And I agree with her.
Yeah. And I think at least all of the K through 12 district plans that I've seen do offer that choice. When it is safe to reopen in person, whenever that is. Some districts have pushed past Labor Day, fall break, whenever that is, that they are giving parents a choice to keep their children home if they'd like. And so the fact that that choice will remain there, I think is good. And like you said, that's where it's up to the parents to make the best decisions for their own families and their own situation. Lana Tups, I want to get to your comment. This was about 10:25, 6 minutes ago, where you said online is very difficult for managing children with learning challenges. And that is something that we have also heard a lot. I think we also popped up a comment from you, Lana, about you working and going to school and trying to have the kids online. And then when you add in some learning challenges, that makes it even more difficult. And so another thing that I'll be asking Superintendent Hoffman today, she knows I'm coming with a long list of questions, these in-person learning supports that districts are supposed to provide starting August 17th. In the press conference, it made it sound like kids with special needs would be included with that. But then the question is, okay, well, how do you qualify? How do you decide which students need that in-person support? They're trying to minimize the groups of kids. And so then you're kind of getting into a situation where you're having to decide, well, which kid needs this support more? And actually, that was something that came up in the Gilbert Public Schools Governing Board meeting last night. They were talking about what they have to offer by August 17th based on that order as far as in-person supports. And one of the board members said, I'm struggling with this idea that we're going to have to decide which kids need that support the most, and that we're going to help some, but we're not going to be able to help them all. And she was very candid about that it's difficult. And so I think getting more clarification on that. I know several parents of kids with special needs have asked, are they eligible for this in-person support that districts are supposed to be either offering on a campus or pairing with a group like the Boys and Girls Club to offer. So again, this gets back to we kind of have more clarity, but not really. And so it's just kind of always okay. Like we think we're taking a couple steps forward and then we're still a little confused. So that's why we're doing these things, oh, this is great. Okay. Let's see here.
I was going to bring that one up.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The USD just let me know that they will allow my special needs child to go to school for 3 hours a day on Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, to just work on IEP goals and minutes. They will provide busing. That's awesome. I am so happy for you. That's great because as a mom of a child with special needs, I know that consistency is key, and really with children in general, not just a child with special needs. Having that consistency, I will tell you, we went on vacation for 1 week and we stopped therapies for a week with one of my kiddos, and we came back and it was like, okay, we just regressed a couple of weeks. So we just took a week off, and so I am so thank you, Christy. It's good news. And hopefully if that's happening to Christy at CUSD, it's happening with other parents who have kiddos with special needs. Only 3 kids allowed at a time. And so again, we want to touch on, we know that there are daycares that have been open over the summer, Danielle, with a lot of these essential workers. I spoke with one lady yesterday from that scholarship program that the state has put out for essential workers. At 0 cases of COVID. I think when you have such limited number of kiddos in the classroom, it really limits the contamination or the possibility of having an outbreak. So thank you for that information, Christy. Hopefully other parents are getting the good news that you just got from CUSD.
Yeah, and Ana Pena also chiming in there just a minute ago or so, asking about kids who have no adult supervision. And this is something, in speaking with school counselors in the districts, that they are very concerned about. Again, if their parents are essential workers or they work out of the home, that you have older kids now supervising younger kids, or potentially kids just by themselves. And so that's where I think clarifications on who qualifies for this in-person support that the districts are supposed to provide. And I know the Boys and Girls Club has been setting up virtual mentorship centers where kids can go and be supervised doing their remote learning. I know Apache Junction had some pictures on their Facebook from their Boys and Girls Club up there of kids on their computers doing their remote learning. And they had like a couple staff members going around just supervising. But again, these are smaller groups. They're following those distancing guidelines. All of them were wearing masks. So Ana, hopefully we'll have some more clarification after today about who qualifies to take advantage of these in-person supports. But that's great that we're hearing Chandler's doing that. And, maybe in the coming days, we'll hear from more districts as well on their plans.
Lena, I know you have a question about how we can get our children tested. I'm assuming you mean for COVID-19. And if that's the case, I know that the drive-up testing site with FamilyTreeHealth.com, and that they're partnered up with the city of Phoenix. They were doing testing for anybody. I saw on a Saturday a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old getting tested for COVID-19. A good friend of mine in Phoenix, she's had her 2 boys tested. So if you're talking about COVID-19, I want to say sign yourself up to get tested, and also check back and sign your children up. I want to, yeah, there you go, FamilyTreeHealthCare.org. They are partnered up with the city. They've got CARES funding for this, and they had a lot of spots open 2 weekends ago because they're not seeing the high numbers of people showing up to get tested. So there's definitely a possibility up there. If you have any problem, you can contact the newsroom. I have her number directly. If you have any issues with getting your child tested, send me an email, send the newsroom, at ac15.com. We'll be happy to help you getting more information. I don't know if, there she said, testing for the IEP. Well, for the IEP, it's done through the schools. So if you are your district, you do call your special education personnel. That's how we did it for my son. And so I don't know if you're a homeschooling parent or if you are you belong to a district, but depending on those two, send me an email. I'd be happy to at least route you in the right direction. And thank you for the COVID testing. Yeah, absolutely.
We're just here to provide any information we can, whether it's what you're asking or not. We're going to give you information.
All right.
Yeah, I'm trying to go through all the comments. Thank you again, all of you out there who are participating with us today and asking questions. And again, any questions that you might have for the superintendent that maybe we can't answer here, please post them in the comments. I will be going back through and looking at these before that interview. But again, I think still so much uncertain, and all of this as, August 3rd, August 4th, August 5th, next week is a big in districts starting their online learning. I mean, I think we have 20 or so districts that are getting ready. Their first days of school are next week. And so, as this gets going, hopefully we'll be able to get more clarity and more answers. Again, I know those benchmarks are due out by August 7th. I'm hearing they may come out sooner than that, which would be great. I know the doctors or the medical professionals and educators who were down at the Capitol yesterday morning were talking about the need for that guidance like yesterday. And they're a little frustrated that it's taking this long. But again, it's a process. And so that's something that we'll be watching as well, because those benchmarks will kind of set the stage for how districts, how schools are going to start the process of reopening. So there's always plenty to be looking for, right, Karla? Right now with everything just kind of still up in the air, and we're all moving through this together, just trying to keep up.
We really are. I got to say, when you talk about those benchmarks, I wish we had them, 2 weeks ago, but it is what it is. I tell my kids, these are the cards that we've been dealt with. Now we got to make the best out of it. And I tell my husband as well, this is what we're being given. But hopefully sooner rather than later that we get those benchmarks, because I think that just really help us see where we are with our state COVID numbers. And I know that, they're lagged, and I know that they're behind, and I know that the numbers that we report today are really from about 2 weeks ago, but it is what it is, right? There's no changing that. Like, we don't have control over that. All we can do is base ourselves off of what that is, of what that's being reported, and really make the best decisions based on what we have at hand. So Sarah just said, please answer the question about the synchronous teacher-led portion of the executive order. Cricket shoving students into a platform, there we go, that will not involve teachers or any kind of interaction to provide true education. It also does not provide for students in ELP or with IEPs. AP classes are also not available for students on this platform. So maybe this is a really good question for Superintendent Hoffman, how that synchronous teacher-led portion of the executive order, since she's been working hand in hand with Governor Ducey, because I don't have that answer. Do you, Danielle? Do you have any idea about that synchronous teacher-led portion?
No, I don't. I'm trying real quick. I know we only have a few minutes here, but I just wanted to try to pull up his executive order to see what we may be looking at here. Let me see if I can pull it up, and then I'll share the screen. Let's see, the synchronous. Yeah, I know this goes into, remote learning looks different for different students based on, age, district. There's so much that goes into it. Let me see if I can, let's see. Okay, here we go. Health benchmarks. Okay, I might have to kind of dig through this at a different time.
It's on section 2 of the order, is what you're saying.
Okay, section 2 of the order. The greatest. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So let me share this really quick. Let's get on here. Thanks for bearing with me. Okay. Screen. Executive orders. Open for learning. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so right in here, it says, to the greatest extent possible, schools should offer synchronous learning where a teacher provides instruction in real time. So that is what the executive order says. The one thing I noticed is it says to the greatest extent possible. So that's not a mandate. That's simply saying do the best you can to offer this. As far as, kids in those AP classes not being able to access things on a platform, that's a great question for the superintendent, but also I think a great question for the district, and how they expect kids to get the most from this remote learning if their platform seems to be prohibiting some of that. So that's something that we can dig into a little more going forward for sure. But that's what the executive order states, is that to the greatest extent possible, districts need to provide that synchronous learning.
So that's really key information right there, because the district can come back and say, we're doing the very best. This is what we can provide as far as synchronous led learning. Right. And that they can use that to really, say we can do this many minutes a day or this many hours a week. And it may be limited. It may not be what we want to hear, but then again, that's how it's written. So
right. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, though. I think it's important that we're, really looking at what these orders say, because we know you aren't the only ones trying to interpret them. Families all across the state, school districts, charters, private schools, anybody involved in education right now is doing the same thing, trying to interpret the metrics and the orders that are coming down. So, okay, we are going to go ahead and wrap up today's Facebook Live session. Tomorrow morning, Karla and I won't be here because we do have a virtual education town hall tomorrow afternoon. So that starts on the ABC 15 Facebook page live at noon. We will have several experts joining us to talk about the current state of reopening. And also we'll have a public health official with us to talk about some of those benchmarks that we should be looking for. So we hope that you'll join us for that. And then Karla and I will be back here Friday morning at 10 o'clock to recap everything that we have talked about this week and to really push ahead to next week when we have, 20 plus districts starting their remote learning. So thank you all so much for joining us. Yep. And we will see you guys back here on Friday.
Thank
Say bye.